It is the story of a conflict of great violence, and of which no one sees the end. The story of hatred between two nations fighting over the same land for decades. Suicide attacks, air raids, urban guerrilla. Every day, the powder keg in the Middle East threatens peace. This conflict, which no one understands anymore, started a century ago. It is this story we are going to tell you. Why did some Jews decide to return to Israel, the ancient kingdom of Judea, after 2,000 years of exile? Why did they fight the British colonial troops? How did they impose themselves against the Arabs of Palestine? Just a few years after suffering one of the greatest traumas the world has ever known, Nazism. For years, movie lovers filmed their adventures. Jews, Arabs. Their films testify the violence, but also their daily lives, their hopes, and their dreams. For you, we found these amateur films. With Barbel and Ella Weiler, two little German Jews who narrowly escaped Nazi persecution with their parents. With the Katz family, Jews from Eastern Europe who endured the genocide before illegally joining the State of Israel. With the Aaron's Zionist activists, we will tell you about the tragedy and the odyssey of the Jewish people in the 20th century. We will also see the Said family, Arabs from Jerusalem. With the Kauri in the city of Jaffa, as well as several actors of the Palestinian drama. We will follow them in their revolt and on the roads of exile. From Hitler's accession to power in 1933 to the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, a look back at these 15 crucial years, which marked the world and which continue to influence its destiny today. Berlin. The year is 1933, April. Hitler has been in power for 2 months. Germany's new leader is an obsessive anti-Semite. He accuses Jews of dominating the world and exploiting it. He said to one of his deputies,
"The economy is completely dominated by Jews. It is their universal empire, which they have extended over all kingdoms. The fight between them and us begins. What's at stake is simply the destiny of the world."
A month later, Hitler attacks writers. He organizes nocturnal ceremonies where books written by the communists and the Jews are burned.
übergebe dem Feuer die Schriften von Karl Marx. Ich übergebe dem Feuer die Schriften der Schule Sigmund Freud. Frechheit und Anmaßung!
Hitler entrusted the head of propaganda, Joseph Goebbels, with converting the German people to his theories.
Dazu wollen wir euch erziehen. Deutsche Männer und Frauen, das Zeitalter eines überspitzten jüdischen Intellektualismus ist nun zu Ende. Und der Durchbruch der deutschen Revolution hat auch dem deutschen Weg wieder die Gasse freigemacht. Und der kommende deutsche Mensch
10 years earlier, simply a far-right activist, Goebbels wrote in his journal,
I hate them, the Jews, by instinct and by reason. It's poisoning us. From the bottom of my soul. It's hateful and repugnant to me.
at the same time, in the vicinity of Berlin. Meet the Weilers, a small German Jewish family, vacationing by the lakes. These girls are Hitler's enemies. The father, Friedrich, is holding the camera. He's filming his wife Hilse and the two little girls they had, Ella and Barbel. He is an image enthusiast. He gives his daughters a camera so that they immortalize their family happiness. In their country house, Barbel and Ella, like all little German girls of their age, live a cloudless childhood.
It is paradise. We are all together. My mom is the best mom in the world. And my dad is the strongest. He's a former soldier. He received the Iron Cross during the First World War. But for some time he has been saying that he wants to leave Germany.
From the window of the family apartment, little Ella recently attended a Nazi parade.
I am afraid of soldiers parading in the street. Dad explained to me that they were dangerous. They sing. They walk at pace in black boots. Even just seeing them, it's just horrible.
The Weilers are very integrated into German society. Little Ella goes to public school, but she is the only Jew in her class. And since the Nazis came to power, she feels more and more isolated.
The other children come up to me and say, "Jewish, Jewish." My teacher doesn't like us. He explained to my father that Jews are not allowed to have very good grades. I don't want to go to class anymore.
Designated as public enemies, the Jews are, however, very few in Germany, less than 1% of the population. Less than 1% in France as well. Where, Despite the extreme right, one of them, Leon Blum, is preparing to form a leftist government, the Popular Front. In Western Europe, most Jews are perfectly integrated. They obtained equal rights with other citizens in the 19th century. Some of them, like Sigmund Freud, the inventor of psychoanalysis, or the physicist Albert Einstein, are among the great figures of Western culture. In fact, of the 11 million Jews in Europe, most are elsewhere. They are in the East. Look at this exceptional document, shot when Hitler came to power. This world has completely disappeared. We are in Munkex, in Czechoslovakia. Here, Jews make up almost half of the population. They live in a community by practicing small trades and in the cult of their 1,000-year-old tradition. Some of them, religious Jews, dress in clothes inherited from the 18th century. They have their own language, Yiddish. And 3,000 years after Moses, they continue to recite the prayers of the Hebrews. Communities out of time. Far from the great upheavals of the world, and at the center of which is the rabbi. Here, wearing a fur hat.
Keep doing Shabbat. Listen to me, stick to Shabbat and everything will be fine. Say the prayers. We don't have the right to do less, it's important.
In 1933, the Jews of Munkex are far from imagining that in barely 15 years, their community will have been almost entirely exterminated. However, Jews have lived in fear for centuries. Traditionally in Europe, they are held responsible for all the misfortunes that affect the population. They are accused of living off the work of others, of being parasites, and of belonging to an impure race. Above all, Christians consider them responsible for the death of Christ 2,000 years ago. Absurd accusations that fuel hatred and cause outbreaks of violence. Massacres that we call pogroms, thunder in Russian. The last wave of pogroms dates back to the end of the 14 to 18 war, when thousands of Ukrainian nationalists stormed Jewish neighborhoods and tens of thousands of people were massacred by them. An investigator, Ladeo Motzkin, testifies.
Old people and children have been cut into pieces. Thousands of women have been raped. Victims have been mutilated in the most atrocious way. Their right arms and left legs were cut off. Or vice versa. Here, the moral state of the Jewish population approaches dementia.
In Eastern Europe, more and more Jewish families are now considering moving abroad. This is the case in Kaunas, in Lithuania, for the Katz family. They are traders who are also very well integrated into local society and have been living in the country for around 50 years. This family movie dates from the year 1929, before Hitler came to power. Here are the grandparents, Vesha and her husband Zidimar. They are walking on the boulevards with their grandson, Zvi, who is 3 years old at the time. Delalia and Yitzhak, the parents, all we have left of them is this beautiful photograph of the year of their marriage. Their eldest daughter is 16. Her name is Dida. She perceives more and more anguish in her own family.
I have heard about the pogroms in Poland and Ukraine. My dad recently said to my grandfather, "Take our money and take the whole family away from here, because the Lithuanians will soon throw the children out of the windows." We are advised to leave. But I don't want to. Everyone loves me here. And life is so good for me.
"200 kilometers away, the same year, we are in Riga, the capital of Latvia. This is the Ahrens family, bourgeois, like the Katz family. They own a small confectionery factory. They also film family members at home with one of the very first personal cameras. Same superficial smiles with the same apparent good humor. However, among the Ahrens, some have already made the decision to leave the country. This is the case for this 16-year-old boy who teases his cousins on camera. His name is Mikael. As this photo shows, Mikael Ahrens, here in uniform, belongs to a youth organization. He is one of these Jewish activists we see more and more in Eastern Europe in village squares. They are called the Zionists. They adopted an anthem, the Hatikva, which means hope in Hebrew. Their hope is to reach Palestine on the other side of the Mediterranean and to settle here on the Hill of Zion, in Jerusalem, the ancient capital of the Jews. Zionism was born in the 19th century, long before Hitler. For the founder of the Theodor Herzl movement, the Jews will always be under threat. Wherever they are, whether they integrate into society or live as a minority. according to their tradition. They must therefore constitute themselves as a nation and found their own country where they can defend themselves. Physical training. Hebrew lessons. Before their departure for the land of their ancestors, thousands of young Jews are cared for and trained. They learn agriculture on Zionist farms. They are the future pioneers of Israel. In the early 1930s, Mikael joined one of these farms with his group, Bitor, a radical Zionist movement.
We will sleep in the tent. We sing. We're training. For us, it is a necessity to fight. Because we all share a love for Palestine. This land which is part of our history.
In the 1930s, the Middle East was shared by the great powers. After the First World War, France was given control of Lebanon and Syria. Already present in Egypt, Great Britain administers Transjordan and Palestine. In 1917, with the Balfour Declaration, Great Britain officially opens the doors of Palestine to Jews. Each year, thousands of them land in the Promised Land with their families and whatever they were able to take with them. They join a small local community, which has never left the region, and which has never stopped praying here, in front of the Wailing Wall. It is the cradle of Judaism. The last remnant of the temple, built 2,000 years ago by Herod, the King of Jews. The temple was destroyed by the Romans. All that is left today are the surrounding walls. A few meters above the wall, the Muslims have built one of their most beautiful religious buildings. According to the Quran, the Prophet Muhammad gained paradise here in the 7th century AD. It was also in Jerusalem where Christianity was born. Each year, thousands of people go on a pilgrimage to the site of Jesus' death. It is on this thrice holy land where the Zionists intend to implement their project, founding their new homeland, and settle permanently. All over Palestine, they found a new type of agricultural villages, the kibbutz. In one of them is a young Polish Jew, Joel Iglinski.
I had no future in Poland. Here, we are a big family. We are going back to farming as in the Bible. Men and women, we work all day while our children are in daycare. On the kibbutz, we are all equal. We share everything. Everyone pays their salary to the community. And we make all of our decisions together.
For these young idealists from the depths of Europe, the experience is unique. With his comrades, Joel Eglinski simply intends to build a different world.
We are committed to building socialism. The red flag flies on the kibbutz. We admire Herzl, Leon Blum, and Marx. We are revolutionaries, and we know that we will change the world.
On site, the inhabitants who witness the arrival of the Jews wonder, what do the Zionists want? How far will the colonization of land go? Why are they coming to Palestine? In the 1930s, the Arabs of Palestine numbered 1 million. They represent 2/3 of the population and are spread throughout the territory in hundreds of towns and villages. They are called Palestinians in memory of the Philistine people in antiquity. Before the arrival of the British, they lived under the empire of the Turks for 4 centuries. Watch these color images shot at the beginning of the 20th century. Their Oriental culture has always fascinated visitors. Some of them are Bedouins. They live in the desert with their herds. But most of them are peasants. They work for great Arab landowners, like here on the coastal plain, where the famous Jaffa oranges are produced. They are exported all over the world. For several years now, some Arab landowners have agreed to sell their land to the Zionists. And little by little, the face of Palestine is changing. In 1935, Jews already represented 30% of the population. They created dozens of villages along the coast and in the north. This does not prevent most Arab families from living the pre-war years without mistrust and in a certain welfare. This is the case in Jerusalem for the Said family. Christian Arabs who own a publishing house. Filmed by his father during summer vacation, this boy is called Edward. He is the future Palestinian writer Edward Said.
Our family home was in Talbaya, a neighborhood of Palestinian Christians like us. The imposing 2-story villa had many bedrooms and a lovely garden in which my 2 younger cousins, my sisters, and I could play. It was a very idyllic time.
On their family movie, Nothing yet suggests that this idyllic period is about to end. At the same time, in Germany, the situation becomes dramatic for the Jewish. The Nazis, who seek to create an ethnically pure country, multiplied provocations. And anti-Semitic inscriptions are spread throughout the country. On the trams, and even on public benches. At the Nuremberg Congress in 1935, the Nazis officially exclude Jews from the national community.
Schließungen zwischen Juden und Staatsangehörigen deutschen oder artverwandten Blutes sind verboten.
Among German Jews, panic begins to set in. And more people are seeking to flee abroad, to France, Great Britain, or the United States. This is where a Jewish community of 4 million people already lives. But visas for Western countries are granted in dribs and drabs. Thus, more than 100,000 German Jews choose Palestine, where the doors of immigration are still open to them.
A 100 Jewish families arrive in Palestine aboard the Mariette Pasha of the Compagnie de Messageries Maritimes. Most of them are in absolute poverty, the laws of the Reich prohibiting Jews from transferring their property. The Zionist associations welcome these unfortunate people and give them the means to rebuild their lives.
Among the passengers on the Mariette Pasha are the Weilers, our Jewish family from Berlin. Unlike the other passengers, the Weilers come as simple visitors, without knowing yet whether they will settle in Palestine with their 2 little girls and leave Germany definitively. They continue to film with their personal cameras. To convince his wife, Friedrich Weiler shows her around the country. He takes her to the shores of the Dead Sea. They visit Tel Aviv, the Jewish metropolis of 130,000 inhabitants, emerged from the ground in less than 20 years. They visit German friends who are already settled there. However, after a week of travel, they are still hesitant to take the plunge. In Jerusalem, they find a city in turmoil. Close to revolt. At the call of the Grand Mufti, Palestinian Arabs demonstrate against British occupier and its policy, favorable to the mass arrival of Jews. One of their spokespeople explains.
The main case of the Arabs is against the British government's policy in Palestine. A policy which, if continued, will surely have as a result the replacement of the Arabs by the Jews. The Arabs, who decided on a general and a complete strike until the total and immediate stoppage of Jewish emigration is brought about, and until the government introduces an essential change in its present policy.
Since the beginning of the 1930s, demonstrations follow one another in Palestine, getting more and more violent. Attacks on kibbutz, attacks in the middle of the street. In 1936, what is called the Great Arab Revolt finally broke out. One of its leaders is called Fawzi al-Qawuchi. He launched the guerrilla war against the British Army.
We rebel against injustice, against Zionism, to defend our holy land. The English abused Arab blood. Today, we are ready to face them.
In a few months, the revolt spreads all over Palestine and forces the British to send reinforcements. The repression is relentless, like here in Jaffa, where a neighborhood is emptied of its inhabitants and razed. It takes the British Army 2 years to put down the revolt, but it's only temporary. In 1938, on one of the Arab peasants taken prisoner, we find a leaflet, which sounds like a warning.
Today, you are cruelly trying to strip us of our rights, of our houses, of our honor. Know that never, not before having conquered our freedom, will we lay down our arms.
The same year, in Germany, the date is November 9, 1938. In front of the population, which observes and sometimes approves, the Nazis set fire to the places of worship of the Jewish people. It's Kristallnacht, a gigantic pogrom during which 8,000 shops are ransacked and 100 Jews are murdered. A few months ago, Germany took control of its neighbor, Austria, where 200,000 Jews live. In a new outburst of anti-Semitism, tension rises sharply in Europe, and the risk of a new world war draws near. Some Jews in Europe realize that for them, the countdown has begun. Shortly before Kristallnacht, the Weilers made the decision to leave Berlin for good and to emigrate to Palestine. On the photos taken before departure, the parents try to put on a good face, but Friedrich notes in his journal,
We are spending the last few days in fear. Until the end, I feared that the Gestapo would ask us for an additional formality. Last night, my mother thought she was suffocating at the thought of us leaving.
Friedrich's mother, Ida, decided to stay in Germany. She tries to reassure her granddaughters.
Nazis. It's nothing to worry about. We have them, only for a while. All that you'll see, it will pass.
Berlin. The day of departure. The parents take final photos on the dock. The grandmother, Ida, came to say goodbye to the whole family. Her granddaughter, Hella, here on the right, is excited. She doesn't realize it's the last time she's seeing her grandmother.
I am excited about this trip. A new life is beginning. We're crossing Austria, where Hitler has just taken power. We're crossing the Alps. It's the first time I've seen such big mountains. And then that's it. We find ourselves in Italy. The Nazis, with their viciousness, are behind us.
The family embarked for Palestine.
Our boat is called the Jerusalem. To pass the time, my mom knits. And I am reading books all day long.
After 5 days at sea, the Weilers land in Palestine. The parents have chosen to settle in a small house north of Tel Aviv, where they think their 2 daughters will be able to grow up safely. They will soon learn that they are among the last to have been able to reach Palestine. Because in the spring of 1939, the situation changed abruptly. Great Britain, which is still occupying Palestine, makes a decision that calls everything into question. To secure the support of the Arabs in the next war against Hitler, the British will decide to stop supporting Zionism. To limit the number of entry visas for Jews, as well as purchases of land. A catastrophic decision for the Zionists who intended to make millions of Jews emigrate from Europe before the outbreak of war. Their leader in Palestine, David Ben Gurion, in turn, chose force through. He decides to accelerate the operations Towers and Palisades, these creations of colonies which multiplied in previous years and which rely on the effect of surprise. It is July 12, 1939, Negba, near the Negev Desert. The Zionist militants have loaded a convoy of prefabricated houses, which they will install here, on those lands they previously bought from the Arabs. Among them is Joel Iglinski.
You have to go fast. Everyone knows what to do. You build palisades by putting gravel inside the planks to stop the bullets. We're going up the watchtower. We forget the fatigue. Because we are the soldiers of the Zionist revolution. And we know that we're doing something bigger than ourselves.
In the summer of 1939, as the cataclysm that was about to come, Jews held their breath. Some, as we have shown, sought refuge by emigrating to Palestine. Others still hope to continue living in Europe, despite the danger. It will only take a few months for them to go through the unimaginable. The project of the destruction of an entire population by the Nazis. It is this new chapter that we are now going to tell you about. September 1st, 1939. Germany invades Poland. It is the beginning of the Second World War. From the first weeks, the Nazis, who crushed the Polish army, increased the exactions. Forced labor, beatings, humiliations. As shown by dozens of photos taken all over the country of German soldiers unleashing on Jews. Hitler ordered the Polish Jews to be grouped together, men, women, and children, in quarters reserved for them. The ghettos. The Nazis chose to isolate their future victims from the rest of the world, to starve them little by little, before soon deciding to murder them en masse here. The massacre began a year and a half later, on 22nd of June 1941, when the German army attacked the USSR. A big offense, which, in a few days, pushes the Soviets back hundreds of kilometers. In the conquered cities, the Nazis immediately launched the persecutions against the Jews. With the help of the population, everywhere, like here in Zlotso, pro-German nationalists, far-right activists, and defendants launched pogroms under the encouragement of the Germans. They accused Jews of being responsible for massacres, which were committed by the Soviets a few days earlier. In Lvov, Ukraine, a German soldier films the crowd and a Ukrainian militiaman. Dozens of Jewish women, after being violated, will be murdered along with their families. An SS surgeon, Felix Landau, despite being ferociously anti-Semitic, is surprised by this outburst of violence.
We're seeing things that are almost impossible to describe. Hundreds of people covered in blood, holes in their heads, broken hands, and eyes hanging out of their sockets because of the hits. Full of hate and anger.
In a few hours, the massacre spread to dozens of cities. Again on the 4th of July, Germans approached Kaunas in Lithuania. This is where Dita Katz and her whole family live. Do you remember that film shot 12 years earlier, in 1929? When the Germans arrive, the grandfather tries to reassure his family.
Don't be afraid of the Germans. I knew them during the First World War. They are civilized people.
However, from the very first hours, his own son Itzhak disappears at the corner of a street. The rest is told by a German corporal.
Lithuanians with sticks and crowbars hit them to the ground, on the skull or on the face, without distinction. They are beaten until they no longer show any signs of life. In 3/4 of an hour, the one who was presented as the executioner of the city killed 50 people. All around, the Germans are watching the show.
In Bavaria, from his mountain chalet, Hitler approves of pogroms. But he wants to frame and rationalize them. He instructed Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS, here on the left, to set up special units, the Einsatzgruppen. Their mission is to remove within a few months any trace of the Jewish people on the conquered territories. The Einsatzgruppen will shoot Jewish people directly into mass graves. In Leibau, not far from Kaunas, the soldier of the German Navy, Reinhard Wiener, films one of these massacres with his personal camera.
A truck is coming. Guards, force them to jump off. There are weak and sick people among them. They help each other out. They are pushed towards the trench by an SS. When they get to the trench, they have to walk over bodies covered in sand. The firing squad stands in front of them. They are told to turn around, waiting for the next group to arrive.
The scale of the massacre is unparalleled in history. In 6 months, the Einsatzgruppen murdered 500,000 of the Jewish. In front of his troops, Himmler gave the order.
what to do with women and children. I don't think we can exterminate men, and at the same time let their children become adults, so that they can take revenge on our children and grandchildren later.
At the end of 1941, information about the genocide begins to filter in. In Palestine, the Arab population remains aloof from the conflict, even though its spiritual leader, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, exiled by the British, chose to collaborate with Hitler. He raised a regiment of pro-Nazi Bosnian Muslims. The Jews, on the other hand, are alarmed to stop receiving news from their loved ones. This is the case for Michael Arens, the young Zionist from Riga who arrived in Palestine in 1938 and who joined the police force. He is unaware that his mother, who remained in Latvia, was killed in the first days of the German offensive. Friedrich Weiler, too, can no longer communicate with his mother, Ida, who stayed in Berlin. On November 2, 1941, he wrote in his journal,
Horrible news from Germany. The Jews here are being deported from their homes and sent like cattle to Poland. This news is so inhuman that it's hard to believe it. They are asked to dig, and they are slaughtered in these graves.
In November 1941, Ida Weiler, the grandmother, has already been deported to the east. She is here, in Lodz, Poland, with 140,000 other Jews. All those who escaped the first pogroms are now locked up in ghettos. This is the case in Kaunas for Dita Katz. With her mother, her little brother Zuvi, and her fiancé, Yehuda, Dita no longer harbors any illusions about her fate.
I know since my father disappeared that the Nazis are exterminating us. What is happening is unimaginable, and no one is helping us.
At the end of 1941, the Nazis, who occupied almost the entire Europe, launched the final solution. It is the second phase of the Holocaust. From everywhere, in France with the help of the Vichy regime, in Romania, in Yugoslavia, in Poland, Jews are grouped together, then directed in panic to unknown destinations. It's from Holland, at the Westerbork transit camp, that we have the most precise testimony of the deportation of the Jews. These images were taken by German soldiers. They are unique documents. Every morning, a train takes several thousand people to the east. A Jewish nurse, Eddie Hillesum, attends the departure.
The cattle trucks are filling up little by little. I see an elderly person going to the last stage of the disease, saying the prayer of the dead. The babies, with squealing little cries ripped from their cribs. Young women are already sitting in the wagon. Are these doors really going to close? Unfortunately, yes. Thin openings still let glimpses of faces. Will we ever be able to describe to the outside world what happened here?
For the world to realize the tragedy that has affected the Jewish people, it will take another 2 years. Spring 1945. The end of the Second World War. After 5 years of nightmares, Europe celebrates victory over the Nazi regime. One of the worst the world has ever seen. During the winter, Allied and Soviet soldiers liberated dozens of extermination and labor camps. Majdanek, Auschwitz, Bergen-Belsen. And the world has learned how the majority of the victims perished. In gas chambers and crematoriums, which sometimes still burns even after the camps are liberated. The toll is 5 million Jewish victims. 6 million, as we learn a little later. How did the world let this genocide happen? At a meeting of the World Jewish Congress, one of the leaders of the Zionist movement, Nahum Goldman, let his anger out.
If there would have been a Jewish state in Palestine when Hitler appeared on the horizon and came to power, a state and a country which would have opened its gate to all the Jews who had to come and to escape, this tragedy wouldn't have occurred. 5 million Jews massacred in Europe because of the homelessness of the Jewish people. We have certainly the right to demand that the world shouldn't wait for a second lesson of this kind. The real solution of the Jewish problem cannot be brought about unless the Jewish people will be given the right and will be helped by the United Nations to establish Palestine once and for all as its own Jewish homeland.
The port of Haifa, in Palestine, a few months after the end of the war. On makeshift boats, sometimes on the verge of sinking, the first survivors of the camps reached the Holy Land. On one of these boats is a Polish Jew, a Garcher Rabinovich.
From where I am, Palestine seems like a paradise to me. It's the first light I've seen in 17 years. I am crying with joy. Do you know what it's like to be welcomed somewhere after being hated for so long and driven from country to country?
Relief for some, but concern for others. Faced with the arrival of Jewish survivors from Europe, once again, the Arabs of Palestine are protesting. In Jaffa, a teenager, Yusuf Chaker, asks the question,
Jews suffered horribly during the Second World War. But we Arabs have nothing to do with it. Why should we suffer the consequences? Nazi genocide against the Jews. Why don't they create their state in Europe, where they were massacred, instead of coming to us?
To deter any new Arab revolt, Great Britain continues to apply its pre-war policy. This forbids Jewish people to go to Palestine, but this time it gets all the undocumented immigrants arrested and groups them together in camps. After the Nazi death camps, these Holocaust survivors experienced British prison camps. They will react soon. In Europe, 150,000 Jewish survivors wait near former Nazi camps, like here in Austria. They are reluctant to return to Poland or Russia, where they fear returning to the anti-Semitism they have always known. Among them is Dita Katz, who miraculously survived the death camps. Despite the death of her father in 1941 and that of her husband in 1944, Dita chooses to return to her hometown in Lithuania, where she hopes to reunite with her pre-war friends and rebuild her life. Her younger brother Zuvi, the boy filmed in 1929, is now 18 years old. He too has survived the Holocaust, but he makes a different choice. With his mother, they decide to go to Palestine. To circumvent the British ban, he made contact with an underground network. And it's Zionist agents who are going to take him all over Europe without any identification documents and without a visa. In 1947, one of these trips was filmed by the American journalist Meyer Levin. By train, then by truck, Zuvi and her mother crossed Poland, Czechoslovakia, Germany, Austria. After several weeks of travel, they are dropped off at the foot of the Alps with a group of refugees, and it is on foot that they will cross the Italian border illegally.
There are women and children with us. But nothing can stop us from reaching Palestine. We are 2,700 meters above sea level. Mom is not weakening. We feel sure of ourselves because we know that we will finally have a country like everyone else.
On the other side of the border, they embarked on the Rhone region at night on a clandestine ship. It is from here that dozens of ships take Jews to Palestine to land them on a deserted beach. High-risk trips. One of these ships, the Exodus, was recently boarded by the British fleet. The collision caused several deaths and injuries, and the Exodus was sent back to Germany. This time, the Zionists want to take every precaution. As soon as a ship is in sight, the 950 illegal passengers are ordered to evacuate the deck, and they take refuge in the holds. Journalist Meyer Levin continues filming, while his partner, Tereska Torres, keeps a logbook.
This boat is a modern jellyfish raft. There is almost no air, no light, only an unbreathable smell. Women, often hysterical, faint. Around 1 a.m., a little boy was born. The mother screamed at the top of her lungs for 2 hours.
After 12 days of navigation, as the ship is nearing its destination, a plane flies over the illegal immigrants. It is followed by a British warship that approaches and orders the machines to be stopped. Unmasked, the passengers go out into the open. For them, as Tereska Torres notes in her journal, the dream comes to an end when the English soldiers take control of the ship.
We are living the last hours of the boat. As we get closer to Haifa, the city is rising before us, so beautiful and forbidden to these poor people. A company of armed and helmeted soldiers is waiting for us on the quay.
The passengers are all directed to prison camps that the British established on the island of Cyprus. It is there, locked behind new barbed wires, that Zivi Katz and his mother will spend several months. For them, and for the Zionist activists, the situation has become unbearable. In Palestine, Jewish armed groups decide to take action and launch a campaign of terror, extremely violent attacks aimed to subdue the English and drive them out of Palestine.
This is the voice of Fighting Zion. This is the voice of Fighting Zion, the underground radio of the Irgun Spy Leumi. Today, our soldiers, in defense of their country, attack the enemy's police headquarters in Jerusalem. Irgun Spy Leumi takes full responsibility.
On clandestine radio, an 18-year-old terrorist, Gula Cohen, threatens
you, British people, are going to pay for every tear of the Jewish who stretches out his hands, and to whom you refuse help. Hell will enter your lives, and terror will flood every part of your body. For we have taken an oath to liberate the land of Israel.
In Palestine, Arab attacks are now responding to Jewish attacks. And a region is once again on the verge of explosion. The news arrives from New York that changes everything. It is November 29, 1947, at the headquarters of the United Nations. An extraordinary general meeting must be held on that day. One of those that will make history. Commission of Inquiry. Public hearing. Speech. For a year, the international community has been studying the solution for the Middle East and is preparing to vote on the territorial division of Palestine. In green, the territories offered to the Arabs. In blue, those that are offered to Jews. In the middle, the Jerusalem area, which would be administered by the international community. The Zionists accepted the division, but the Arab countries all announced that they would vote against it.
Now, to vote. Those who are in favor will say yes, those who are against will say no.
To be adopted, the draft must receive 2/3 of the votes.
Afghanistan, no.
Undermined by guilt over the Jewish people, the United States announced that it would vote in favor and Great Britain that it would abstain.
Australia.
The suspense concerns two countries.
France, yes.
Tempted to the end by abstention, France has just given the Zionists a helping hand.
On the voting on the debate.
It is followed by the Soviet Union.
Soviet Union, yes.
It's unexpected,
United Kingdom,
but the major powers are swinging the vote.
the United States, yes. Uruguay, yes. The resolution of the DUC Committee for Palestine was adopted by 33 votes, 13 against, 10 abstentions.
In a few minutes, the cause of the Zionists has just progressed like never before. In the crowd in Tel Aviv, who explodes with joy at the announcement of the news, there is the young Berliner, Barbara Weiler.
Our dream is becoming reality. The Jewish state is getting closer to us. It's fantastic. We dance, we laugh, we sing. Everyone embraces each other without knowing each other. What a joy!
They crossed the borders clandestinely, reached their promised land on makeshift ships. They now have the support of the international community. At the end of 1947, the Zionists seem close to their goal. Will the two parties now succeed in coming to an agreement? According to the UN, sharing must be followed by two separate states, one Jewish, the other Arab. We will explain to you why this project did collapse in only 6 months, and how the creation of Israel plunged the Arabs of Palestine into misery and exile for decades. November 30, 1947, the day after the UN vote. A young Arab from Jaffa, Afif El-Khoury, is revolted.
Why should we give away half the country for them to turn it into a Jewish state? And what will then happen to non-Jews? Now there is only one solution: to fight.
To defend their rights, thousands of peasants are engaging in the guerrillas. One of their leaders is Fazi al-Qawuchi, one of the heroes of the Great Arab Revolt of 1936. He has only a few weeks to train his troops.
My soldiers have only basic weapons that they bought themselves. We sent SOS to neighboring Arab countries. In vain. Yet the hate is so intense that we are ready to sacrifice ourselves.
In the opposite camp, the Haganah, the future army of Israel, has been training for months. Supervised by veterans of the Second World War, it is made up of highly motivated young recruits. Among them is Zvi Katz, here, on the right of the photo. He escaped from the Cyprus camp thanks to a clandestine network.
All I think about is fighting. For us, it's a matter of dignity. We no longer want to be like animals that are killed without saying anything. Never again will we allow ourselves to be slaughtered like sheep.
The two young Berliners, Ella and Barbelweiler, they too were involved in the Haganah. They have just learned that their grandmother died during the war in Poland, assassinated by the Nazis. They are determined.
During the war, no one acted to save the Jews. Today, we can only count on ourselves. If we don't help ourselves, who will help us?
In the spring of 1948, Fazi al-Qawuchi and the other Arab leaders launched their troops to attack Jewish positions. One of the targets is the kibbutz of Mishmar Hamek. the crossing point from Galilee to Tel Aviv.
We'd attack at 5 on the Sabbath day of the Jews. I'd give the order to fire the cannon to destroy as many houses as possible. They seem to have a lot of losses.
Opposite, the kibbutz defenders respond blow for blow. One of them, Joel Lowton, films the fighting.
We're trying to repel the enemy. And we hope to hold out until reinforcements arrive. Fortunately, after a few days, Haganah soldiers end up joining us over the hills from Haifa.
In a few days, Palestine is on fire. Offensive, counteroffensive. The Haganah, better organized than the Arab army, manages to gain the upper hand within the first few weeks and to take thousands of prisoners. In the conquered cities, the population is frightened and is considering fleeing the fighting. On April 9, 1948, an event reinforced these fears. In Deir Yassin, Jewish extremists massacre nearly 200 Arab villagers, including children, a carnage of which no image remains, but the news of which goes around the world and triggers panic. In Jaffa, a few rare candid photos show residents abandoning their homes and leaving the city. Among them is Yusuf Chaker.
We heard about Deir Yassin on the radio. We heard that the Arab countries were coming to rescue us. In the meantime, we preferred to leave. I get in a truck, we pile up, and we head to Beirut.
This is the beginning of the Palestinian exodus. A few streets away is Afif El-Khoury.
The whole city is fleeing. On Arabic radio, we are told that we will be back in 2 weeks. But is it for sure?
Those who have fled will never be allowed to return home. From now on, the city of Jaffa, deserted of its inhabitants, will officially be considered an Israeli city. May 14, 1948, the day everything changed. It is 10 in the morning in the port of Haifa. The British governor, Alan Cunningham, sets sail for England. Britain ends 3 decades of presence in Palestine and leaves the two sides to face. 6 hours later in Tel Aviv, the leader of the Zionists, David Ben Gurion, decides to proclaim the Jewish state.
ביום סיום המנדט הבריטי על ארץ ישראל. מתוקף זכותנו הטבעית וההיסטורית ועל יסוד החלטת עצרת האומות המאוחדות אנו מכריזים בזאת על הקמת מדינה יהודית בארץ ישראל. היא מדינת ישראל.
After years of struggle, the Zionists are reconnecting with Jewish history. Behind their flag will be a minority of the Arabs of Palestine. 150,000 people who choose to stay there and who will become Israeli citizens. Today, 60 years later, they represent 20% of the population. But most of the Arabs in Palestine are on the road. Almost an entire population, men, women and children, are now fleeing abroad. It is called a Nakba, catastrophe, in Arabic. The exodus that began in April after the Deir Yassin massacre, and it will affect more than 700,000 people, 2/3 of the Arab population. The entry into the war against Israel by 7 Arab countries the day after Ben Gurion's speech doesn't change their fate. After several weeks of battle and the capture of the old city of Jerusalem, after several spectacular advances, the Arab armies are retreating and losing new territories. A situation that further reinforces the flow of Palestinian refugees. According to the latest historical research conducted in Israel, half would have been forcibly evicted by Israeli soldiers. They found refuge in neighboring Arab countries, in Jordan or Lebanon, in refugee camps. Among them is Abu Hicham, who is 19.
They gave us tents. The ground is wet. We don't have a country anymore. One can't live normally anymore. They give us bread and cheese. I feel humiliated, and I only think of one thing: to return to my village. As long as it takes, we will fight.
Hate, humiliation, exile. In 1948, the history of the Arab-Israeli conflict is just getting started. Today, Abu Hicham, 78, still has refugee status. He lives in a Palestinian camp on the outskirts of Beirut, Lebanon, a few kilometers from Afif el-Khoury. For 60 years, neither has been allowed to return to live in their native land, Palestine. Some have emigrated to the West, like Edward Said, the little Christian Arab from Jerusalem. A university professor in New York, Edward Say was one of the most famous spokespersons for the Palestinian people, until his death in 2003. On the other hand, in Israel, everyone tried to rebuild their lives, despite the trauma of the Second World War. Michael Ahrens, the young Zionist from Riga, dedicated himself to agriculture in Galilee. Very marked by her childhood memories, a little Berliner Ella Weiler married a Jew who came from Germany, just like her. They had 2 children. Her sister, Barbel, married an Auschwitz survivor of Polish origin. She lives with him in Tel Aviv, grateful to her father, who died in the 1960s, for making them leave Germany when it was still time. It was only in 1972 that Dita Katz left Lithuania for Israel. There she met with her brother Zvi, who had become a reserve officer. They live in Tel Aviv, in memory of their loved ones murdered by the Nazis. Perhaps the most surprising is Joel Iglinski. At the age of 99, he still lives in Nekba, the kibbutz he created in 1939. More than ever, he remains faithful for the socialist ideal of his youth.